Welcome everybody to the November Florida Tug. Some context for us. We used to be the Orlando Tug, and then back in 2020 when everything went down, we noticed that a lot of the ones in the state weren't meeting anymore, but we were still meeting every other month. So Tableau allowed us to combine with all of them so we could do the entire state until the other ones kind of get up and running. Last I heard, Tampa has their tug up and running, so that's great to hear. So if you are in Florida, please, get with others in your area and get your tug up and running. Meantime, we'll be here for you. I noticed in the chat that we got a lot of people from different parts of the country, so thanks for being there. Also connect with those tugs that are in your state, in your area. A lot of times we used to meet in person, which was always great to do that. So, just get connected as much as you can. The leadership team is myself and Yamil, who's on the call as well. We both were given that Tableau Community Ambassador title a couple weeks ago. This Yamil's second time, it's my first time, so that's super neat to be able to do that. We also have Erica and Jeff, Katie, and Andrew. So it's the six of us trying to bring this stuff to you guys every month. Our promise is monthly events, whether that's virtual, hybrid, or in person. We've been doing that consistently for the last 2 or 3 years. We might take a break in December, but we'll be back at it in January. We're also want to network with everybody, allow you guys to ask us any questions and vice versa, and obviously share those job opportunities whenever we get them. I think I tried sending out an email for people to send me any Tableau job opportunities that they had. But Gmail didn't like it. I was sending it was like 2,000 emails and they didn't like it. So I wasn't able to get that out. But if you have a Tableau or data job that's available, feel free to put that in the chat for people to look at so we can share those opportunities. You can connect with us in a few different ways. LinkedIn, we have those 2 user groups. We have our own Twitter handle and hashtags. We have our own Slack channel if you ever want to hit up any of the leadership or anybody else that's in there for questions and comments. You can always email us at our Gmail account there. And then obviously our user group landing page on the Tableau site. We will be giving away some swag later today. You have to be here at the end to be eligible, because sometimes we get people in and okay, well, they're here, they're good, and they stay for 5 minutes and they're gone when everybody else stayed to the end. So, well, if you stay to the end, we'll capture those who are still here, and you'll be eligible for that Tableau store swag. As we said today, we got Jason Penrod from Playfair Data going over Figma and Information Design. In December, we're trying to do an in-person in Orlando. That's still TBD. We'll communicate that out to those in the area if we end up doing that. But either way, we're back in January with Katrina Johnson from Phi Data. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but she's going to be going over a blog post that she had about recreating pivot tables in Tableau. So today's speaker, Jason, he's a curious designer who has found his way to data visualization through a long and winding road of design and creative roles. As Director of Information Design at Playfair, he brings his passion for design to the analytics world through product development, interaction design, and user experience design. And with that, Jason, the floor is yours.
You're recording, right? Just want to make sure.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, that's awesome. Let me share my screen real quick. Let's see.
I see a lot of jobs out there, people posting jobs. Please do so, or let us know, send us an email, contact any of us, and we will help you putting out there. There's always amazing people joining these user groups, the best place to find good talent.
All right, I think I got it.
Okay. Yes.
All right. You guys see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. Yeah, my name is Jason Penrod. As you saw my little intro there. Work for Playfair Data, Director of Information Design. It's been quite a, like my bio said, a long and winding road. It's actually really been interesting to kind of see, I never would have imagined would have landed in data visualization, but It's an absolute perfect fit. I love my job. I love everything I do every day. So I don't know, I feel pretty lucky in being able to say that. But today, one of my big passions is really this idea of Figma and crossing that with information design. So I've got a little kind of deck I'm going to walk us through, a little bit about me, but what we're going to get into hopefully pretty quickly is really some actual Figma work. And I'll kind of explain what we're going to do there when we get to that point. So, this is about me. That's the same little bio that we already kind of had read to us. But, my career started as a designer, actually, long ago as a photographer. And I worked at a couple different companies. I worked at Hallmark Cards for quite a while. I worked at a couple of internet.coms, and I've just kind of traveled through both like physical, analog kind of things as well as digital. And so I got into product development 20 some years ago. And you can kind of see from I just pulled some interesting old pieces out of my portfolio. Really started in product development, like with toys. Did a lot of little toys, electronics. These are like projectors. But then I also got into designed one of the first apps for the Hallmark brand itself. When the iPhone had just come out and you could just start putting apps on the thing. One of the earliest apps from the Hallmark Cards group. And then I've done some game design as well. So it's just a really interesting little mixed bag of sort of experience and skills. The thing that kind of stretches them all together is really this idea of understanding the user. And you can actually see over here on the right side, I've done quite a bit of collaboration with the MIT Media Lab during my time with Hallmark. I've also worked with IDEO and a couple of other big design firms. And the thing that I really love about design is that it's that interface between a product or a message or your brand, and it's what we put in front of the people that use those things. And that's a huge passion of mine. It's just really understanding people. I love the interview process to really understand like what is this, if we're building a dashboard, I want to know who's using it, what are they trying to do with it. So many times I feel like we can get specs from a client and then come back and talk to the actual users, and there's like 2 or 3 really interesting things that maybe we wouldn't have gotten in the specs. So I feel like that one-on-one or like small group kind of interview is something that we don't always get. It's so nice when we do, because I feel like we can really get at what people want and need. And that's what sort of, I learned some of those lessons back when I was designing physical product, and it's definitely stretched and translated very nicely into digital product as well. So I also have kind of I guess, I don't know if it's odd. I feel like it's odd sometimes. A left brain and a right brain. I kind of can sort of pivot between those two. I really love the analytical side of things. I love, data sets and sort of looking for, those interesting insights inside of a data set, and Tableau's, the tool that I love to use to do that and find that and visualize those things. But then I've also got this right side that's, I grew up with a fine art kind of background, a lot of painting, drawing, photography. So it's definitely a mixed bag. I've got both those things going on. And that's why I love these tools. So Tableau on the left, and then this is the logo for Figma. And I've actually put the little Adobe logo over here to the side as they just bought Figma, which I still have a question mark out on that, honestly. So my own personal opinion right now, but I've used Adobe products for years, and I still love Adobe products. But what I loved about Figma was that it was breaking down a lot of the paradigms that we had I felt like gotten stuck in with some of the Adobe products. I felt like they were really trying, and maybe this is the best strategy for them to kind of break out of their own sort of pattern. But jury's still out on that. I love the Figma products so much that I just have my fingers crossed that they add to it and not take away from it. But anyway, that's my own little thing. So anyway, that's kind of what I do day to day. is use all those tools, mostly Figma, sometimes Adobe, but Tableau as well. Those are my main tools that I use. Director of Information Design, I've thought a lot about this. And I think it's interesting sometimes when you get something like this where it's information design, what's the difference between that and data visualization? And I think there's a lot of theories on this, and I've researched it a little bit, and everybody's kind of got a little thought, but for me, these are the two main kind of stories that resonate for me. Information design, I feel like, is a pretty broad term. It captures a lot. You might have a broader set of information graphics and storytelling and a lot of these other things inside of that. Whereas I feel like data visualization, really true data visualization, is really kind of a subset of that bigger, broader sort of topic of information design. So that's one way that I try to kind of differentiate the two. Maybe the more important one is the one on the right, where it's data visualization on the left, where it's really it's looking for insights from a specific data set. And you're going to have a layer of data. You may be able to build multiple vises on top of that data. And what your hope is to reveal something specifically about that data. And it's a little more on the discovery side. You may or may not know what those insights are. It may take an expert user who's using your interface to find that insight. Sometimes you may stumble upon that insight as well. So it's more about kind of, I think, revealing what's inside a known data source, and doing, making tools that it's going to, help others find those insights within that data set. Whereas I think on information design, the thing that I bring to it, and not that you don't do some storytelling and data visualization, but I feel like when you really, like, even if you pull a dashboard together, you're really talking about storytelling. And that's why I gave us our little storytelling arc here. And it's also about bringing together multiple things. You might have some visualization, you might have some data, you might have video, you could have graphics. You're also using different storytelling components, like a turning point. The biggest and most important one, I think, is you have an objective of some sort. You sort of have the end in mind when you're really talking about information design. A lot of times it's a very complex situation, it's a complex process, and you really have to break it down and try to understand, like, how do I put this in a way that people are going to understand? And honestly, I kind of point at the little graphics I even made for this slide. I was trying to kind of get across the concept between these two, and just in making these little graphics, it's trying to simplify some of the complexities and the nuance between those two things, and put them into a visual way with a few words. I definitely had an intent and an objective. I wanted you to at least walk away with either a new definition of the two, or a new understanding or an appreciation between the two. And so, hopefully you're able to get some of that. And I think the difference is that, the storytelling is the biggest piece of it to me. As I move on, it's such a big piece, and I really love this idea of a turning point. I've spent a lot of time in the creative space, and I've done a lot of video work. I've done a lot of, even at Hallmark, doing greeting cards, and storytelling is a huge thing there, working directly with writers. So, I've spent a lot of time understanding what are the storytelling mechanics, and how do you use those storytelling methods to get your point across, and to take, a user base that may or may not know what the topic is, or maybe they know it very deeply, but you're taking them on a journey. And by the end of that journey, you really want them to have, changed in some way. And I think, at the end of the day, that's the best that we can do. I know here at Playfair, we really we want to help people, make better decisions, make informed decisions about their company, from the data that we provide them, from the tools that we are able to put together. So, and that piece of that storytelling, I think, is so important. Is like, when they come into it, they may understand something in a certain way, and by the end of, using the tool or going through the presentation, they've changed in some way. There's something new that they've brought within themselves to kind of understand. And it doesn't always have to be positive. They can definitely debate you on it, and I think it starts that conversation. And that's really what we're trying to do. And I think the main piece of the thing that I've always loved about storytelling is this turning point. And I really like this Michael Hogg's 6-stage plot structure. This is one I've used a lot. It's based on the 3-act sort of play. A lot of storytelling is based on the 3-act play. And I like the way he's kind of broken this down. You may have heard of like story beats, where you're kind of pacing how you reveal information, what's happening at different points in a story. And I think there's some interesting ways to kind of relate this into either the way I'm interacting with a dashboard or a visualization, or it could even be a broader presentation that may contain multiple visualizations or dashboards within it. And I think it's really great to kind of think through this sometimes as you're starting a new project, just like, okay, what do we understand? What's the setup? What's the environment we live in today? What's new? What's changed? Like usually if you're building a tool, you're building a dashboard, you're doing some sort of analysis on something, there's a world that was known and then there's something new coming along, and it could just be the new month. But a lot of times, I know the work that we do, there's something new. Like, when COVID came around, it was like there was a lot new. Every business was going through something and changing. So, there was a lot of new questions that businesses had no idea how to ask or even get answered. So I love this idea that you've got sort of the known world and then this new situation. Something's come up. And each one of these is essentially a turning point. So looking at that new situation as an opportunity, change of plans, which is, usually in a story, and this is where, you kind of have to take this with a grain of salt when you're talking about building like an analytics tool of some sort. But I do think there's still a lot to be learned from, just kind of going through the process. You want to show progress being made. There could be complications. There could be, hurdles to get over. And those are really important in that story. Like, it also depends on who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to the CEO of a company, you may not want to go into the whole, the deep story on some of this stuff. You may want to say, hey, there's a new situation, there's something we don't know. And then maybe you're going to sort of, fast forward to some of the end product there, or the answer. But I think it is really good to kind of go through this process too, even in the development of the tool or the whatever interface that you're designing, because there's a lot to be learned in this. There's a lot of lessons, there's failures, and I think it's important to kind of take account of some of those things. Once you've kind of overcome those complications, then there's sort of this, usually in storytelling, there's like a final sort of push, where the hero, it feels like maybe they're not going to make it, and then finally there's a climax, and then this aftermath is really about what is the change. So you started in a known situation, you're faced with something unknown, and by the end of it you've sort of been changed somehow, and you have a new lesson of some sort, or a new decision has been made. So I use this a lot. There's simpler versions of it as well. It's kind of interesting to kind of think through this when you start a new project, or when you are struggling with a project. Sometimes I pull this out and kind of rethink through something. So really important, I think, to do this. But this marks, to me, just a huge change from sort of data visualization to that information design. So I think it's this whole idea of having an intent. What am I trying to accomplish? And we can ask ourselves all kinds of these questions. It's something that it's amazing how easy it isn't to do this. So how many times have you just gotten a new data set, or have you started a new project and you're like, oh, I know what needs to be done, and you just kind of go through the motion. I really think it's important to kind of ask yourself, what am I trying to accomplish with this? What is our team trying to accomplish? What does our stakeholder need to accomplish from this? And really ask that question and try to get some different opinions on it as well, so that you come away with something a little bit bigger. It's not just making a dashboard. We're trying to help somebody do something. We're trying to help solve a problem. bring insight. And I think that is the thing that you learn with that one-on-one interaction, that interview process with a user. I've got tons of stories where, we would do, we gather specs for a project, and then, we would have it all kind of documented. And then we would start having a couple user interviews. And some of my favorite ones are, if we're in somebody's office and they keep referencing paperwork or like post-it notes on the wall. I'm always curious about that. And I always ask them, like, well, what's on the post-it note? And I remember one time in particular, it was like there were all these little reference numbers that this person kept going after on post-it notes. And it never occurred to them. And I posed it. I was like, what if we put those numbers in the system? What if those numbers were in the tool so it was easy for you to reference? And it was one of those things sometimes, like as a user, you've just gotten used to something. And I think it's that idea of kind of, you have to almost shake that user out of their own head a little bit and say, there may be an easier way. Like if we were to put those numbers right in the tool for you, would that be helpful? And they don't know to ask for that, but it's almost transparent to them. And I think that's kind of the magic of sort of these user interviews, user experience, and really starting to understand, who am I talking to and what are they trying to accomplish? How do I help them get there easier? So I think this is such an important and easily skipped over step, is this idea of what am I trying to accomplish? Ask that question. And then it's all about the right tool. Is it a Tableau? Is it a Figma? Is it a both? This is something that you have to ask yourself, well, make sure that I'm using the right tool to do the right job. So now we're going to kind of transition into some of the Figma stuff. I mean, Figma is an amazing program. It's absolutely complex and deep. I know many of you have probably tried it and played with it. Just a couple quick notes on it. If you just go to figma.com, you can use it for free. They have a free version. You can do quite a bit with the free version. So it's easy to work with in that sense. The other great thing is it's browser first is what they call it. So that means there is an application that you can download and install on your PC or your Mac, but it is primarily designed to work within the browser. So any of the modern browsers can run it. It is really nice because you don't have to hassle, like if you have, if you don't have admin rights on your laptop or your computer, I mean, it's pretty easy to run it in the browser. So it's very accessible. It's very easy to get into. And what I think is, the three major features for me, and I was trying to think through this, like, how do I take all these incredible features in this insanely deep application and give people, like, break it into three things that people could kind of wrap their heads around and really unlock some of the power that maybe if you are using it, maybe you're not getting at some of the power. If you've never used it, you're probably going to be a little overwhelmed, and just knowing sort of these are the three sort of categories to think about, in sort of learning the system and figuring out what to do with it. I think flexibility is the top one for me, because not only is it flexible in sort of the way you can use it, and it's in the browser. I mean, it's all flexible in those ways. It's free to get started. It's very easy, I think, to get started because the interface itself, I feel, is pretty simplified in the very beginning. And they're very clever in the way that the developers have hidden the deeper and more powerful features underneath sort of other things. So when you first open it up, you're not overwhelmed with like a million buttons. It's very clean, and you do very simple things right off the bat. And I'll show you that when we start to get into it. But it's like, I want to draw a square, I can do that. I can want to draw a line, I can do that. So you can have early success, and then it's flexible in that all the power that you can use is there. It's just cleverly kind of obscured away from the main interface, but still easy to get to. So it's hugely flexible in many different aspects. The other thing I think is really huge, especially as we get busier and busier, reusability. So there's a couple different takes on that as well. Being able to reuse components, being able to take a single component that I've designed and reuse that all over my design. And I'll kind of have some demo on what that looks like, but that's a huge piece just in efficiency. if I have to design the same thing 100 times, it takes me, I may get faster at it, but it's going to still take me time to do that. If I can design something once and then reuse that piece, for months or even sometimes years, if it's very basic pieces, that just saves me a ton of time over the next who knows how many years. So that's reusability, I think, is just a really powerful feature within Figma. And it's a little intimidating to get started, but I'm going to show you hopefully a couple of ways to just start to understand what makes it a little intimidating, but what also makes it very, very powerful. And then collaboration. This is like, to me, this is the piece that really changed my mind about this software versus maybe even some of the Adobe products. Adobe is definitely catching up in this front, and I think other software is trying to catch up in this front, but being able to collaborate within the same document with team members and be able to like communicate with each other, co-design together, it's absolutely a game changer. When they first brought it in, it was a little weird to think like there's other people looking at the design that I'm working on. But then once you realize like the power of getting somebody else's opinion on your team and having somebody come in and give you a couple of quick tidbits of a decision here or some direction there. Again, it's not like, okay, I need to like save all this out. I need to set up a meeting. I need to get in front of this person. It's like literally you can send them an email with a link. It's all browser based. So even if they don't have Figma, they can like click the link, come right on into your file, take a look at it. They have audio chat in there now. You can do what's called cursor chat. So just an amazing way to collaborate with multiple people on your team or even outside of your team. And I think it's one of those things you don't almost expect that from a design software. But once you have it in there, it changes the paradigm of how you design things. It's a very cool kind of democratic way to design. All right. Let's see. So we're gonna move on there. So that's the end of my little presentation. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump over to actual Figma. Let's see, do this. And can't get to it. I need to hide this little guy. How do I do that? I'll do it this way. Okay. So what I'm going to show you now, this is the main interface of Figma. This is the application version of it. So, when you first open it up, you're kind of met with this interface here. So I'm going to just kind of scroll around. So I really enjoy designing live in Figma. So I find it very easy to kind of work at the same time that I'm talking to somebody and even doing an interview with somebody. I think that's one of the real advantages of this as well, because it's so easy to share and show people. I can do a design, like maybe a dashboard design. And if we're talking to the stakeholders and they've got a change and they're like, we wish it was this way, or we wish maybe instead of vertical, it was horizontal. Again, if you've designed your assets in sort of smart and clever ways, you can make some of those changes, very quickly, within seconds sometimes. And sometimes right in front of the client, which is impressive to them usually. And it also gets decisions made, which I'm always about that, because so many years in the creative industry like this, so much back and forth. And it just feels like things move at a glacial pace. If you can get somebody to look at your design and they give you 2 or 3 pieces of feedback and you're able to incorporate that feedback as soon as you hear it and right in front of them, you've just saved yourself hours. There's no more meeting to set something back up and for you to forget what they said, or maybe you misunderstood what they said. And if you make a change and it's not what they meant, you can solve that right there on the spot. So that's something that I really enjoy, and I sort of promote it anytime we can. If one of our team members is doing the same thing, I just think it's a really effective way to design with stakeholders or with each other. Again, it's that whole collaboration piece. but just to kind of give you a little sense, the first thing I want to do is just kind of set some context for the app itself, and just show you when I first open up a new file, it is pretty simple. I mean, I've got some stuff going in here, so there's a little complexity going, but literally when you open the first file, you're going to have a canvas. You're going to have what I think is a pretty slim little toolbar. You're going to have, you know, maybe one layer in here as soon as you make something. You've got a title for it. There's some sharing and some stuff up here, and then maybe a little bit of complexity over here, but you know, we'll kind of talk about that too. And it definitely can get complicated and you know, filled with things on the left and the right, but I just love the way that you step into this application. And I feel like even if I didn't know anything about this, I feel like, you know, I kind of get that this is a pointer. Maybe I don't know what this is. I'm going to make a square. Looks like a drawing tool, some sort of type tool. I don't know. A hand, maybe. I don't know. So I feel like the basics of what I might want to accomplish, I could probably get here and make some stuff. And I've seen a lot of people do that. I know a lot of our Tableau engineers do that today. They'll get in, you know, to an account and be able to make some basic kind of shapes, and it's really effective in trying to communicate like what your dashboard is going to look like, or what you want, you know, what you want to try to get across to a client, or even to a coworker in designing one of these things together. So I think, you know, really nice interface. We can go through some of the basic tools as we kind of work through some of this stuff. And this is where I kind of wanted to pause for just a second too, and just say, you know, at the end, I'm going to try to get through some of this stuff pretty quickly. At the end, if you guys have questions, or there's something that you know, have been trying in Figma and you just don't know how to get through it, again, I love to take those questions and try to answer those things for you. And usually there's 4 or 5 different ways to solve it. And I would really like that kind of interaction. And if you have questions or anything, feel free at the end to bring those up. We can work through some of that. So I'm going to also show you just some quick ways to kind of get help. If you do get in here, I'm a huge fan of keyboard shortcuts, especially with Figma. So you've probably, you know, I kind of tease sometimes and like, I'm going to make you car sick. And I actually tell my client that sometimes. You can see this is my deck that I just showed you guys up here. Figma works on this idea of like this giant canvas. So it's like the biggest desk you've ever seen, which my brain loves this. I love to kind of lay everything out and organize it visually. And I literally look at stuff at this resolution sometimes. And, you know, I know you can't really read anything, but it really tells me what's going on. Just the way that I lay out this giant canvas. So I just love this piece of it. But to get around, you don't want to like go down here and try to get these scroll bars and stuff. These are tiny and they're almost not usable. So the first thing I always teach people is if you hit spacebar and hold the spacebar, you get a hand. And that hand tool lets you sort of pan anywhere in that canvas you want. And I'm just holding spacebar, click, drag, click, drag. So to me, that's like #1 thing you need to know. The second one is, you just saw me do that zoom. I don't even know I do it anymore, but I hold the control key and I scroll on my mouse. So just with a quick hand tool, I can move over here. And then if I'm zooming in, I'm holding control and I'm just using my scroll wheel. And I can zoom in and out and find exactly what I'm looking for. Those two, I think, are the bare minimum. Like just being able to navigate around the giant canvas and really utilize that canvas in an effective way is huge. So please learn that. Spacebar, control key. Then beyond that, you know, there's a really great little help menu for all the keyboard shortcuts. These are the ones that kind of get you around. So the zoom in, zoom out, and the pan. There's some really powerful cursor shortcuts. So really interesting. So if I click on any object within Figma, you can see I've got a little bounding box around that. If I hold down the Alt key and then I roll over the object below it, it's telling me it's 117 pixels away from that. And I can't tell you how useful this information is. If I click on this guy, I can see he's 351 from the bottom box and then that same 117 from there. So just holding the Alt key while you select anything on the canvas. It's just an incredible time saver. And as you start to design things and really, you really care how many pixels are between every single thing. I mean, it's just amazing. The other one, duplicating things. So, I know this is Ryan's favorite shortcut in Tableau is holding the control key and taking that pill and sort of copying it next to itself. This is probably my favorite in Figma, which is the same basic thing. So if I hold down the Alt key and now I point and click, and now I've just duplicated this. And basically, I only ever make one text field probably in my file because every other text field is duplicated off of that. And so if I need to say, put 2 or 3 things together here, I'm going to make copies of those and make those. And there's some advantage to that. One, I don't have to worry about, is it a different font? I probably want to make it a different size, but at least I know the color is going to be the same. I'm not having to start fresh with a brand new text field. I know I use PowerPoint here and there, which I sort of despise, but every time I make a new text field in PowerPoint, it feels like I gotta go and set the font and set this and set that. It seems very tedious. So just doing a duplicate on anything is just such a nice thing to be able to do. So that's one nice quick shortcut. There's some other ones in here that I'll let you guys kind of explore. If you want to explore them, if you go to this Figma menu up here, it's a little F and it's got the little caret. If you pull that down and then you go to, let's see, keyboard, I'm trying to remember where keyboard layout, keyboard zooms into, now I'm having trouble finding it. Actually, let me do this. So there's another one, and this is very handy as well. Let me show you this one because we'll find it now. So show hide UI. I can do this and hide my UI. So if I'm presenting to a big group, sometimes I'll hide all this extra stuff on the left and right. It just gives me more room to kind of show what's going on. But the other one that's really interesting is this control with a /. And you can see it brought up a little quick menu up here, like a search field. And so I was looking for that keyboard shortcuts and I couldn't find it in the menuing system, but right there after just typing key, I see keyboard shortcuts. And so now what it does is it brings up a little kind of cheater window at the bottom, and I can leave this live while I'm working. If I'm learning a new set of key commands or keyboard shortcuts, and for all these different things, so zoom, tools, text, they're all here. And you certainly don't need to know all of these, but there's definitely some of these. The essentials, pretty good to know. Definitely the tools. I mean, it helps you a lot if you're constantly using the move tool and going to the frame tool, just knowing what those are, it can save you a ton of time. View definitely as well. But yeah, I encourage you to check those out. It really does speed up your work inside the application to use some of those quick keys or keyboard shortcuts. And then finally, I want to get to building a few things. Figma has 2 types of containers, and I think most people are kind of familiar with this idea of grouping. So if you take 2 objects, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut, so it's Control G. So Control G, I can see over here in my layers palette that it just grouped those 2 ellipses together. So I'm selected on that group, and I can move those together now. And I think that's pretty common. Figma also has a way of grouping things, and it's called frames. And these can be a little bit confusing. This is a frame tool up here. This looks like a little hashtag. But if you select 2 objects, and then you can actually right-click on those and then frame that selection. So now those are contained within each other, just like the group. And you might ask, like, well, what's the difference? And there are some differences. Usually what you start to find is like when you start to resize something. So I'm resizing the frame right now, and now I'm going to resize the group. And you can see one thing right away is the group is resizing everything inside of it in proportion. I can hold the shift key down and keep the proportion the same. So if I just want to scale that, but what you notice too, that orange circle with the dark stroke, when I make that small, that dark stroke is not changing. It's getting thicker and thicker in relation to the circle. And so that's something to consider. Figma runs on vectors, which is great because it means that there's no resolution. It basically is resolution free until you export or send something out of it. And even then you can still send it out in a file format that keeps that lossless vector. But it's interesting in that there's some trickery that you have to do because you're working with vectors as well. So right now, like if I went back and I didn't want that, to be such a thick stroke on there, now I have to come in here and change my stroke size and kind of get that back in shape. Or there's another way to do it, which is instead of the pointer tool, the move tool, you can use the scale tool. And this is pretty amazing. You can have a very complex design, and you can see you get a little different arrow style. It's got like some extra little kind of ends on it there. And when you do that, one, it's going to keep things in proportion, but it's also scaling up that, any of the vector kind of components. So that stroke on that circle, on that ellipse, is getting scaled along with it. And this is really amazing if you have a very complex, it's made of like hundreds of vectors, and all of a sudden you've realized I need to make this thing like twice as big. In programs before, I've used Figma. I think other programs have this now, but this was the first one where I saw this kind of a scale tool where it would just let you do that with one tool, and it was just it was amazing. So that's a very powerful feature, and that can actually work in both the frame and the group. The main difference between the two is you can see the group is driven by the size of the objects inside of it. So if I make this circle smaller, that group size just changed. Now it's containing those. In a frame, if I make these bigger or smaller inside, it doesn't change that frame size. The frame size always stays the same. Which can be great, but it can also be confusing and frustrating at times too. So learning to work with frames is definitely an important aspect, and when to use groups versus frames is something to consider as well.
Hey, Jason,
yeah.
if I cut in for a second, we had somebody that asked, he had a question, and I just wanted to ask it now because it's relevant to the section that you're in. He wanted to know if you could show a comparison of frame and group with those two circles that you were working with.
Okay, yeah, totally. And I'm gonna go off script here and pull them out into just the canvas area so we can kind of see what's going on. So yeah, and what I'm gonna do is I've got a group. These are grouped. I'm gonna make a copy of that group. I'm gonna right click, and now I'm gonna ungroup. So now I just have my two circles separate. They're not in any kind of group. And then what we can do is we can frame these. So select them both. I'm going to frame that selection. So one thing you can see right away is this frame gets named, and it's got a little title on it, versus the group, which is just kind of free floating there. Again, if I resize this group, it's going to just kind of squeeze these, more like probably what you're used to like in a PowerPoint or something like that. The other thing I'll just mention right now, because I use undo like a million times a day. Undo is forever inside of Figma. So, if you want to try something, you just try it and you're like, no, not what I wanted, just Command Z. And you can Command Z like back to the existence of the file because it's all cloud-based. So you don't ever have to worry about running out of undos. So the difference now, like if I change the size of this frame, it's not changing anything. It's basically just a container outside of it. And this is where it starts to get a little complicated. So if I select one of the circles inside, you can see this little blue dotted line kind of going off to the left. And you don't see one off anywhere else. If I click on the blue circle, now you see the little blue dotted line heading up to the top. So what's happening is it's using a feature which is actually really powerful called constraints. And so if you look over here on the right side, right now I'm saying I always want this circle to be referenced to the left of whatever container it's in, whatever frame it's in, and I want it to be referenced to the top. So right now, if I change the bottom right of this, nothing changes because it's keeping it the same distance from the top and the left. Same for this circle. If I were to change this and say, instead of the left, I want this to be referenced to the right, you can see that extension go out. Now, if I change this, now you can see it's keeping it to the right side. So being able to define how I want these objects to be handled within the frame is what lets you do responsive web design. Take a web page and turn it into a mobile design very quickly. Because it gets very complex, but when I really define this in a certain way, I can actually make these things scale. So if I want to do scale on both of these, so now I want that to scale in both directions when I change it. And so now you can see we're running into that same issue with the stroke on that. So in that sense, we would have to go and use our scale tool to do that same thing. But the ability for it to sort of, constrain those different objects into that frame is one of the features and one of the differences between them. If I move those things inside of that frame, now I can see left and right is where that's sort of constrained. Whereas this one is going to be, I go on scale. But if I take it back to bottom and left or right, then you can see those blue lines going off to the right and the bottom. So that's one difference there. And that's a great question. This is something that is very confusing for people. So that's something to kind of think about. You can also see things can go outside of the bounds of my frame. This also confuses people. So if I change the shape of this in such a way to where these are outside of the bounds, that's okay. But you need to understand, is that what I want? So again, it's something to practice, something to kind of get to understand. There's one other feature that I want to show since we're out here, and I'll just kind of, I'm a little off script now. Not too far. Let's see, I was talking frames, but then I was going to auto layout. Did that answer the question to you? Does that help? I don't know if we have that interactive ability or not, but.
Yes, that works. He said that was good. And that was good explanation. Thanks.
Okay, great.
There was another question,
Sure.
Jason, about somebody was using Figma and said that they noticed that a very unique set of fonts. Is there a way to bring the usual fonts like Arial, Georgia to Figma?
Yep, there is. So there's a couple ways to do it. If you go to, I think it's here, I'm going to use we just learned those, right? Fonts. Decrease, increase. It's not going to be in there. There's what's called a font downloader, and I'm not remembering exactly where it's at. I can find it at some point, but if you dig through here, it's basically what it does is it's a little app. If you have the desktop version of Figma, it's a little app that will actually, the desktop one, it will use your fonts off your computer. If you have the browser-based one, that's why I'm not finding it. The browser-based version has a special spot in that menu where it's like a helper. It's called like a font helper or something like that. And it's a small application that you download. When you run it, it basically, it gives access to Figma in the browser to your normal fonts file. And that's basically what you do. You just do that one time and then you're all set. You may need some, I don't know if you need full admin privileges. I don't think it's that stringent, maybe just local privileges, but that's the way you do that if you're on the browser. Good question. Yeah, anything else before I dive into auto layout? All right, I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to just use my favorite Alt. And then I've got this frame. I'm going to actually ungroup these. So now I've just got 2 circles. And I'm actually going to make another circle, make it a different size. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to combine all these. Now, instead of framing them or grouping them, I'm going to apply an auto layout to them, which is basically the quick key to get there. The shortcut, the keyboard shortcut is Shift A. And what that does is it puts it in a frame, puts all those objects that I have selected into a frame. And it also employs what's called auto layout. And this is to start to really build powerful components and powerful objects in Figma. It's really starting to understand how auto layout works and how auto layout interacts with the constraints. And those 2 things can interact with each other. So that's where you can really get some powerful, like really amazing, I can take a really complex, like, bar graph, and I can take one corner and squeeze it down, and everything's going to just, flow down to a different size. Or if I have a long horizontal line chart and I need to like squeeze it up, and I don't want to lose like where all that, where all the little points and the lines and everything went. The way, again, it takes a little time to design it, but you design it once, you save that as a component, and then you just pull it out onto your dashboard again, and you can make those changes very quickly and easily. And this is part of sort of the power of that. So what's happening is in this little interface, if I just walk through it, right now it's basically what Figma did was, I'll undo a couple times here just to kind of show you again. Let's see. So I have these 3 things. So Figma is looking at this right now, and I hit Shift A, and it's saying, okay, they're more spaced by width than they are by height. So if I were to change this little guy here, now it's going to stack them vertically. This will stack them horizontally. It's keeping 22 pixels of space between each one of these, and we can test that. So I can measure that out, 22, 22. It's always going to keep 22 pixels between those items. It's going to always keep them horizontally aligned. I can change some of those features by this little guy. Right now, it's not going to show me much because there's not much going on here. But if I were to change this and pull this frame out wider, and then change this to the right side, now it's going to keep them all bumped to the right side, still 22 pixels between each one. So again, it's simple in the beginning, but this is a very powerful feature. And one way that I really like to show people sort of the difference between this and maybe how you've designed things in the past. If I go to my past and say, okay, I'm going to design a button. So first I'm going to draw a little box, and then I'm going to get some text, and I'm going to type in button. And then probably what I would do, this was 4 or 5 years ago, pick a better color for that. So I've got my little button here. Maybe I would combine them and group them together. So let's do that. So now I've got my button. And, all of a sudden it's like, oh, it sucks to have to try to make it bigger or smaller or whatever. So, it's okay, but I'm going to be in here constantly, like resizing this and changing, all these things to try to get it to fit. So in Figma, you kind of have to think about things a little bit differently. So I'm going to steal just the type. This is just text right now. I'm actually going to cut it and paste it back. So it's just all by itself, just text. So now instead of building a button with, a rectangle and a piece of type, which you can still do, by the way, but it's a little trickier. This is so easy, and this is actually kind of fun to do. If I take the button text, and now I hit that Shift A, so I'm adding that auto layout container around it. You can see I get the frame. Always a good idea to name your frames too. So button, so name the frame. And now, so what it's done is it's saying, if there's 2 objects in here, which there aren't right now, there's just 1 object in here. But if there were 2, it's going to keep 10 pixels between each one of them. It's always going to keep them in a horizontal orientation. It's going to keep 10 pixels spacing, padding around the left and the right, which is what this one does, it's going to keep 10 pixels of spacing to the top and the bottom. So now that I have this frame, I can actually fill this frame with a color, because right now that frame is transparent. If I come down to my fill button and hit a plus, it's going to put a white by default in there. So now I've got a button. And if this button needs to say something else, it needs to say button 1, you can see that that auto layout is going to hug and always keep 10 pixels on every side of that. So now I've got a button that's, you know, way more useful, because I can change the text in here to whatever I want, and it's always going to fit it. It also lets you do things like, you know, typically buttons, I always kind of like a little more width than I do height. So if I'm doing 10 on each side to the left and the right, maybe I want to do 5 top and bottom. And so now maybe I've got a little nicer proportion on that button. If for some reason I was going to also put, you know, maybe I needed some small bit of text in there. So maybe I do like a small bit next to it. Now I've got 2 objects inside of there, and you can see they're each treated as 2 text objects inside of the one button frame. But you can see the way that it's keeping 10 pixels between the 2 of them. And you can also see the way it's orienting them. So if for some reason I don't want that to be kind of pushed to the top, I could do a couple different things. I could align everything with the center. So now I don't have to worry about like vertically aligning this with this one. I know they're exactly aligned down that center line. Maybe I want it at the bottom for some reason. It gives you a lot of options. Maybe I want to like push them to the right and my button needs to be bigger for some reason. So once you start to kind of play around with this, it just gives you a whole new palette and a whole new way to kind of think about how to build things. And really the powerful thing here, the thing that, you know, we're always trying to do is build consistency between all of our interfaces. So if I make some of these choices and say, this is the way our buttons are going to look, you know, this is our standard button, and I save this as a component. Now that component is shareable across all of our projects. And maybe I decide, you know, we want radius corners because we think that looks cool. So we're going to do radius corners. And so I'm sort of strange, and I like everything divisible by like factors of 8. So I would, if it were me, I would make this 8, I'd make this 4. Even though I don't need this, I'd still make this 8. So now I've made those design decisions. I've got a 36-point font, bold with the inner font style. I want that my buttons always have 8 pixel radius on all 4 corners, 8 pixels padding on left or right, and 4 pixels padding top and bottom. And now I've baked in all of those decisions so that if somebody comes and takes over my, you know, my dashboard project and they need another button, they don't have to like figure out like, is that an 8 pixel radius or is it 10 pixel radius, or maybe they like 12. But this gives you the ability to kind of bake in all of those decisions. And then if I make this a component, which I think we're kind of running out of time, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to get too far through that. I'd love to hide this thing too. How the heck do you hide this bar at the top? Hide floating meeting control there. Okay. So if I come in and I click this, what I can do is make a component out of it. And now this component is sort of like a master. So if I bring a copy of this component now, you see this one has the purple text instead of the one we had before was on blue. The purple means that I've made a component. There's different kinds of components. You can see that this one's got a filled in diamond. This one is a hollow diamond. So this hollow diamond is a child of this master. So if I come in and decide, like, let's say I put a whole bunch of buttons in my dashboard, and you know, this is button 2. And now, you know, we talk to the client's like, we hate white buttons. We just don't want white buttons. So I can come back into this, find my white color. And now if I change this to, you know, some lovely shade of purple, I've changed it in one spot, but that change has gone through all of the components that are based on this one here. So all the children are going to reference that. But one thing you can see is it's left the override for me changing 1 to 2. So it's really powerful in that you can go in and you can override at a child level any of the things that it's going to inherit, and then anything that you haven't overridden, like the color of that background, is going to be open to changing in one place, and it's going to proliferate through the entire design. And we've done this before where we've built like dozens of dashboards with a certain logo. And then the client comes back a year later and they're like, we have a new logo. And we can literally go into one component, change the logo out, and every project that you open that you worked on maybe a year ago, the logo has been updated in every single one of those projects. And the placement's the same and everything is, it's like magic. And it would have taken you probably 2 days to go and find all those and do that. So there's just huge power in being able to kind of like work this way. And these are the complexities that if you just look at this little menu at the top and you start making boxes and text and, that's great. You can really be effective and get a lot done. But as soon as you start to peel back a little bit of the power of what's here, you see like this very simple tool set at the top is just insanely expandable. And you can do just incredibly complex things. So I know we're a little over here, but I do, if my team is in here, which they are. So my favorite thing, I wanted to try to get to this. So collaboration, this is the piece that I think is just amazing. So I don't know if my team's still around or maybe they had to go, but I didn't put any of this here. Maybe I put this here, but my team came in here while we were talking, and hopefully somebody's still around and they can jump back in here because I think it's cool to see. They basically built all this stuff. So here's Raphael, he's one of the designers on my team. So we're both in here at the same time, and if he's made something, I can come in here and look at it. He can look at it. We can talk together. I won't do it right now because it'll probably be distracting, but you can actually do audio. So you can enable audio chat between the two of you. We also have this cursor chat. You just saw Rafa said hi. So if you just press the /, it brings up a little dialog box. I can say, hey, what's up? And so quickly, it's amazing because you can also see Rafa's up here. So I know Rafa's in the file with me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And it's amazing to be able to kind of do that. I mean, we'll find each other and, if Rafa's working on a different project, I'll find him in his Figma file and then I'll show up and cursor chat him and he chats me back and I ask him a quick question and then I'm on my way, So, I mean, it's just amazing how quickly you can solve things. Or if I need help with something like, hey, Rafa, what would you do here? I'm struggling. I need some help. He can jump in and we're both going to try a couple things, and we're going to like make 3 or 4 options. And then by the end of it, we're going to make a decision. I'm going to delete 2 or 3 of them and then he's on his way. So it's just an amazing kind of addition to the whole software.
There was a question, Jason asking, is that chat option only available on the desktop version?
No, that's in browser too. The audio, I think you have to have a paid version, but the cursor chat you can do, anywhere. And the audio, if you do have a paid version, the audio works in browser or on the app, either way.
So there was another question saying from Kit, so where's those graph in the collaboration section?
Yeah.
Created in Figma?
Yeah, these are all made in Figma. Yeah, this is
Wow.
This is some stuff Rafa has been doing. And this is kind of cool too. I'll show you this real quick. So we've got our layers palette, which we've been looking at here, but there's also an assets palette.
Okay.
So this is where, we call ours the Kingfisher design system, but this is a design system we've been developing for, a year or more. And so we keep putting in like starting points. So you can see we've got a little data visualization section here. And if I wanted a quick bar chart, I can just drag this out here. And we've already baked in some design decisions in this, I've got placeholders and I can come in and change all these type, to whatever I needed to say. Text, whatever. If I want to put in some fake numbers, I can do that.
So this could be
built.
Okay, so this could be awesome all this access to and everything you have for like a wireframe or like a super quick wireframe, right?
Yeah, yeah. The idea is you want to build like you want to build your component library, your design system in a way to where it's very modular. So if I need like a full blown like line chart with all the all the Tableau official lines and like reference lines and all of that, then we've got that. But we've also got one that's just text with a bar. So if I need to build one that's like got 100 bars in it, then I can quickly pull one of those out and then move on from there and just duplicate it. So we've got lots of different levels of that. And you can see things like Tableau native things, like here's our favorite parameter drop down. If you're doing maps, here's our map zoom stuff. And we've built all this in Figma. So these aren't like, these are components, so they're somewhere out there that we've built them and put them in our design system.
Okay.
It's like toggles, a ton of toggles. So a lot of times, like you said, like if you're doing a quick wireframe, you just need something super fast, you can do that. We've also got like, every client that we take on, we end up building out a pretty robust design system for them that's got their brand styling. And, we'll either follow their style guide or we'll follow like a website. If they don't have a style guide, and just say, okay, this is their color of orange, this is their color of green. And that's another piece that you can put in here too, is there's an entire sort of library of colors that are our Playfair colors, and these are already baked in here.
Okay.
So we've defined all these in our design system. So now I know, if instead of me just coming in and saying, oh, what's the color of red that we use? I don't know. It's like I can make this and just quickly select, nope, that's Kingfisher red. That's our red that we use on all of our branding.
I see.
Yeah.
I see there are questions here in the chat. Let me give you one. The first one, what will you consider some essential Figma plugins from Kim?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a big question. There's so many of those, but I've got a few favorites.
Yeah, your favorite, yes.
So I'm a terrible speller, so I love this one writer for Figma. Strangely, of all the things Figma has, and I hope it's coming soon, but they don't have like a spell checker. So this writer for Figma is great. It's been in beta. It's just out of beta. It works pretty good. Let's see. I want to look at. So you can see I've just downloaded a ton of these plugins. I'm just going to quickly go through here and maybe give a few of my favorites. This checklist creator is pretty cool. Find and replace. I mean, this is handy. I mean, to be able to get a plugin and like, again, if you've changed something throughout an entire dashboard or multiple dashboards, you can go in and do a find and replace on it. This flow kit is pretty cool. If I open this up, if you're into doing flow charts. So I can quickly, let's see, open this up a little bit. Oh shoot, they're gonna make me buy it. But anyway, if you do, I think the manual you can still do. This arrow. This one was cool. I used it a bunch. I can't remember exactly how it works now, but you can basically do like all the flowchart stuff, like the blocks, all of the flowcharts super fast. I haven't used it in a little while, but that's a good one. I like that one a lot.
Cool.
Yeah, there's a ton. I mean, there's so many. This Iconify is great if you're looking for icons. Type in anything. So I don't know, happy.
There was someone asking, is there an option to add forecasting in time series charts?
Forecasting in time series charts. Again, there's no real charting going on in here. I mean, we're kind of just drawing all of these. So if we want to do it in Tableau, if we want to do that forecasting in Tableau, then we would have sort of a way to do that within Tableau, and then we would mimic it here as far as how it would start looking. So we would mock something up like this, and then communicate with our Tableau engineer on like how we want to sort of work this out and do that forecasting.
So Jason, these are just basically pictures of graphs. They don't
Yeah.
point to any specific data.
You're right. Yep.
Okay.
Correct. They're
Yeah, so-
drawing, you're drawing, yeah.
Yeah, these are just drawings. Yeah, so if I come in here, like I can like literally come in here. I don't know how this one's built, but maybe I can't on this one. Oh, I'd have to. So when it's a component, sometimes you have to like what's called detach it. And so it makes it not a component anymore. So now you can see these are just points that we've like faked in.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, we draw all this stuff, and you can imagine like if I'm going to draw that, you know, if I'm going to do 9 of these over the next 9 months, I'm going to draw that 9 times. I mean, I don't know, that adds up. But if I draw it once and now I can reuse it 100 times, I mean, that's where you start to really see some savings.
So there was a good question here. It says from Kamal. He says, Figma seems super flexible. As you prototype dashboards in Figma with Tableau in mind, what are some common tricks that you use to ensure your layout aligns with some of the limitations that Tableau have? For example, Tableau uses columns and row grid systems with padding and margin constraints. So it's kind of like, how do you make sure, like, is there any like best practice of like making sure that it would align in Tableau?
Yeah.
After you go there?
Yeah, it is a very frustrating thing because we have so much flexibility in Figma, and we know the constraints and the limitations of what Tableau can do. So we end up designing things. I mean, typically we don't use the flexible sort of layout in Tableau because it's just so hard to control and make things, you know, consistent, especially if you're doing a lot of background image work.
Okay.
A lot of times what we'll do is we'll use like, you know, we'll just fix the size. We end up using, you know, like a 16:9 a lot because this is perfect PowerPoint. And so many, unfortunately, so many, I think dashboards and vizzes get turned into PowerPoint slides. So
Okay. I have the same problem.
yeah, this is such a popular size. A lot of times our dashboards are based on this. It also fits on a screen really nicely too. So what we typically do is try to design things. I mean, that's part of that interview in the beginning that I was speaking of is like, you know, we've had instances where, you know, we've designed dashboards where the dashboards, it's not going to be used on screen. It's for a field group and they don't even have computers. They get printed out on letter size paper vertically and then handed to people out in the field. So in that case, we went with a letter size and we built the whole dashboard at letter size knowing that it was going to be printed out. That's a little unusual, but it really, like if we had designed it at 16:9 and they're trying to print it onto a letter size sheet and we didn't know that was going to be the case, I mean, we would never have known that if we hadn't had that user interview. So I think that's, again, why it's so important to have that interview in the beginning. But yeah, one of the main things that we do is just try to use fixed dashboard sizes in Tableau. And then, you know, we'll end up building a lot of like, you know, if we want like little containers in the background, and we want the little rounded corners on stuff, then, you know, we end up designing a lot of that just right within the tool itself. And then, you know, basically lay this out and then hand this off and put it in Tableau as a background image. And then we'll put charts right on top of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's typically the way we'll kind of work.
Jason, the assets you have there, are those things that you guys built out, or was there a repository that you went and grabbed some of this stuff from? Like Tableau Public's got things you can download and use so you don't have to recreate everything from scratch. Are all the stuff that you have in the assets things that you guys created yourself or someplace you went and got from?
I'd say like 99% of the stuff we've created, even the Tableau pieces. I know there is a design system that you can get. There's a bunch. If you go to, if you're on Figma and you go to the community, there's a ton of stuff you can get, you know, and usually they give you like a little bit for free and then they want you to pay for the rest of, you know, the design system or the component library. There is one for Tableau out there and it's pretty good. I don't think it's expensive either, but I don't know. We basically, we don't use every single piece. It has like 200 components in it or something, which, I mean, we probably use a dozen. So we've designed our own. And that way too, we just kind of know the way they're designed. Like, you know, sometimes you can get stuff that like, this is resizable. Like this is, you know, we designed this, we know it's going to work. We know it's exactly the way it looks in Tableau. If I need to change the copy on this to something else,
Mhm.
I can do that here and
Nice.
still resize this. And it's just, I mean, I'm sure it's great. I've never tried the Tableau one out there, but there's a ton of them out there. I would say just be a little wary because some of them are done really, really well. And you can kind of tell. There's a lot of them out there too that are just, you're going to end up struggling. And maybe you get an idea from it and build your own component just off to the side and then delete the one that's there, because there's just certain tricks that you want to have in there and you want to make sure it's as flexible as it can be.
I had just two questions.
Yeah, totally.
So a few years ago, Salesforce acquired Tableau, and at the time, people were worried that like it was going to go away, and it was going to get merged so much into Salesforce that you wouldn't recognize it anymore.
Mhm.
Now that Figma was bought out by Adobe, any concerns with that merge or anything you're looking forward to with that collaboration?
I mean, at first I was worried, to be honest. I think there's something just really, I mean, Figma really took it's a totally different take on how to develop software. It was designed by designers. I think Adobe, I've got my fingers crossed, honestly. I don't think it's going away. Adobe has a product that I actually use. I gave it a good fair shake. It's called XD. And it's basically, it was them trying to kind of mimic what Figma had done in the industry. And they ended up shutting it down. I mean, I think you can still get it, but they're obviously buying Figma for a reason. So the thing I don't like is that now, it's great if you already have a Creative Suite license because now you get it. If you've got your whole system set up, I'm just scared as to when that gets transferred to the Creative Cloud, what does that mean for us? Hopefully it's good, but jury's out. Yeah, definitely.
Do you think that there will be a free version after everything is integrated and everything? Do you think there'll still be a free version of Figma out there?
I think so. From what I've heard, that it was strategic for Adobe to buy Figma. It was just so mature as a product. I don't think they're wanting to make like massive changes to it right away, definitely. But I think the free version, so many people get so much out of that. And I think it does lead to, companies purchasing it or individuals purchasing it. They give you enough to kind of get started, but if you really want to do stuff, like if you want to share components across multiple teams and, you got to pay for that. There's just certain things like in this, we get, I think in the free version, you get one page? They just changed it. It was like you could get like 3 pages or 2 pages or something like that. But if you went beyond that, then you weren't able to, it cost money. So it gives you enough to kind of go on, but there's definitely some things that you're going to want. And the pricing isn't that crazy. So hopefully they keep that too.
All right, we only have like 5 minutes left here before the Zoom will end on us. My last question, let's bring it back full circle. Figma and Tableau. How do you think these two tools work best together? Is it wireframing? Is it just better dashboard design and appearance? Like, what do you think the collaboration there, like what works best?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I think at first, when we first started playing with this was a few years ago. Ryan Sleeper and I first started kind of playing around with bringing, this heavy design to some of the dashboards, and people really loved it. So I think in that sense, that just combining the two in like, if I just output this as a background image and put it in my dashboard and then build some charts on top of it, it's a great place to start. I think what we've sort of seen is that what we can dream up in Figma, one, you can move fast. So for wireframes or quick prototypes, it's great. Like, do I want, like I can decide, like, do I want this kind of a chart over here, and then this is going to be a scatter plot, and then I'm going to have 2 rows of something here, like just to kind of work that out and then go, well, maybe, but is there a better way to do it? Like, okay, I want to do a second version. I want to, forget this thing, and I want to do this, just 2 of these. Like being able to just do this, what I call gray boxing. If I just gray box out 2 or 3 versions, like that can be a huge advantage. But I think in the end, what it's helped us do is really innovate new charts, new interaction, new UX. Like, because I want to do like a drop-down menu that's not like the Tableau drop-down menu, and what that forces me to do, instead of having this thing all over my dashboard, which it's fine, but it's the same one we've seen since the 80s, So what it's done for us is it's let us kind of figure out ways to use tricks in graphics, combine that with tricks in Tableau, write some interesting calculated fields, and do things that you wouldn't imagine were Tableau. And to me, I think that's really what's moved the needle, is combining these two tools together has really let us kind of prototype things in Figma, and then translate that into Tableau and using calculated fields or parameters or any of the number of tools we do have access to in Tableau. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the combination of the two tools.
Wow. There's other questions, and we don't have time, so I would recommend anybody that have any questions in the chat. Hey, connect with Jason. Send him the questions on LinkedIn. Send him those questions in a message to him, or send it to me, and I will send it to Jason. I mean, it's just a few questions, but yeah,
Very open. Anytime. Love that.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Amazing stuff.
Yes. Jason, thanks for your presentation. We had almost 50 people here to the end for an hour-and-a-half meeting. That's great. Wow. Thanks everybody for hanging around. We'll contact you if you win the swag next month. You're off. Enjoy the holidays. Then in January we'll get recreating pivot tables in Tableau from Katrina. Again, if you need anything from us, you've got our email. You've got this presentation. We'll send out a link to the recording once we get it. Jason, again, thank you so much for presenting. We'll have you back in a few months after the merge has happened a little bit. Maybe there's some different changes you can kind of go over, but appreciate the time and effort.
Yeah, thank you, friends from Playfair Data, everyone there, from Jason, Aiton, and everybody there. That's great friends of the Tableau user group. They're also based in Orlando, Lake Nona. So very wonderful, amazing consultants and friends of us. So more than glad to have them here anytime.
That's great. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks. Interesting. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. All right.
Bye.